Welcome to our morning session. I'm interested today in starting our shape where you gradually sense balance in all the muscle layers, not really the back layers, but the frontal spaces. So when we can find the blocks below the knees and just kind of mosey into it, even though mosey might not be what you think this pattern of movement is, but you do have your props behind you, your bolster across, your blankets lengthwise, spine-wise. And with that layer of movement that you'll be required to do to access this first pose, you want to kind of get a feel of maybe a little bit of forward tilt. So the buttock flesh basically is broadening, right? You're not trying to push that in. You want to feel that everything can be kind of open, right? And as you slide forward with your hands onto your lower bones, maybe get a feel of that structural shape, right? Even though it seems like the bones have points, but there's a lot of contours and roundness to our bones. So as you're moving to upright and your blocks are stuffed in under your legs, if you want to use the belt around your feet into your hips for a traditional cobbler's pose, go for that. That's fine. Otherwise, our basic balance will be to reach our elbows down to the bolster. And then as we guide our ribs to this puffy rib zone, kind of a puffer fish here, then we put that blanket so it's just the right amount of height. I definitely like this extra height under my head so that my head is not tilted down at all. So this is different than what we're usually doing with this pose. It's a little more challenging, so you have to have openness in your chest to do this. So then add a sandbag across. Now, if any time it feels too much sensation that's building either legs, hips, back, anything, then you can take a little bit of a release position by putting your feet down, hips distance, knees point up. And then maybe try it again. So it might take you some coordinating of your breathing muscles right in the beginning to get the body to kind of permeate through the body to relax. So I take a belt, I'm holding onto it, and I'm sliding my hands out wide on the belt. And with that reach with the arms, they kind of have not really a stopping position, my arm bands. So let's take these moments where we might close our eyes, have the basic gist of the shape. And then as we allow the breath to permeate in through breathing tone, we coordinate how we'll hold the belt and how we'll have the sand on our ribs. So I would encourage you to feel the grip on the belt and the movement of the elbows open. And then sense if you can take the hands wider, broaden out the reach on the belt. And if any time you need to bring your knees to point up, to kind of lengthen your spine down, get your tailbone to move downwards, and then let the legs fall back into that traditional hip branch, right? It's like the branch of the hips. The feet are certainly together. They're not poised by pushing the whole foot together, but you feel the layers of the bones touching. Now letting your eyes relax and the breath fully recovered in your focus. And inhale, receiving your breath. Exhale, empty the lungs. Slowing down the mind. However, it may be a speeding up of acknowledging where your efforts are in your body, where there's sensation or, sometimes struggle with loosening up. So let go of the belt and let the arms expand, open the chest cavity. So you'll feel this as a chamber in the mid body, the core chamber. And with that lift of the bolster, like this, is the horizontal process under the spine, suggests working on the kind of the liberty of the lungs, right? So we're getting a little bit more lung liberty maybe. So there is the back of the lungs that has, the back body has 70% of that coverage of lungs. So feel where your arms expand and then be sure that the arms are kind of feel like they're bracing the bolster. It's like the bolster this wide does give me a little challenge. So I'm trying to kind of hug the bolster with my elbows, no matter how long my arms are. Because our rib cages, even though they are different measurements, right, we're still working with that simplicity of just getting a breath in and lengthening that. So the bolster gives us that life force, right, with the width of it in the back. And then flushing out. And let's feel the knees point up for a moment. Bring the knees to point up. Feel the soles of the feet slide down so they're approximately hips distance. Walk the feet as close to your seat. And then as you press down into them, without any ambition to get up or to shift your hips, plug into the back of the pelvis, feel its natural arch. And then try that shape of cobbler's pose one more time. This time you might keep the blocks, or you might go ahead and slide them out, kind of shift them, and noticing maybe your block should still be there in some small degree under your knees, and maybe your feet are not touching in this version. So you can get a sense of the direction in the hip. We do seated poses when our feet are not touching and we're working on the hip layers. So noticing that deeper inner thigh awareness. Maybe you don't feel a pull in your inner thigh necessarily. Maybe you feel it in your back. Okay. Take the hands so they're together, interlacing over your chest, and then press the palms to the ceiling. Try to stretch your hand a little bit with that interlace. And then as you move your arms back, enjoy that motion, slowing it to half of your speed that you would normally be moving your arms to make a point. So you're trying to make imprints internally to loosen up tension. Okay, now as the arms release back open, we start to fold at the hip joint. So you're going to feel the back of the pelvis press, then the knees point up. And I hope that gave you a good symmetrical selection of opening into the first shape. So now we're going to work into our side sage. So I want you to let the bones really simply roll left. And you're going to probably use your elbow to kind of jolt yourself up onto your side. And as I put my sand now onto my hip, I might notice that my right leg is not super happy to be pressing down to the floor. So if you have a block or a ball or a towel, you might use something even less animated for your leg. So it gives that direction of the hip to be level, right? So you have the knee joint, but you can put the knee on the floor if it doesn't cause you any stress. We do plenty of seated poses where they're not level. So that would be a cause for knowing that's okay. But when I put my blanket here, I have it stacked fairly substantial with the height of my bolster. You don't have to do that. You can have your blanket lower. But you might notice, oh, my neck needs that comfort. Maybe you scrunch up your blanket so it's really into that left side of your neck, so it's very comfortable. But here's one where you might want to block overhead. So choosing the supports, play with that height and feel how you would sort out, and I'm changing this up a little bit with our blanketing. But if the back of your head is on the blanket, it's probably not as important for you to have that much bulk. But come into the side world, take the opportunity to work with either the stillness of the shape, or if you're feeling a little fussy, right, and want to do some movements in the position, you can let the right arm open and broaden from the center space of the rib, right? So find where the attachments are, right, into your soft tissue, and then try to open out that wing, right, that right expander. But of course, you want to put that right arm overhead at some down moment so it can pause and reflect, as the practice is one of reflection, right? Inner reflection. So eyes could be closed, they could be open, looking for some source of support. But yes, let the waistband reach with breath. At some point, you stop all the excitable motions with the arm. You find a still point, and you let the ribs movement reply with the breath, right? So the breathing, automatic, involuntary focus now becomes a little more voluntary by your direction. So take that in breath, fill the body. And then on the exhale, let the whole body receive and enjoy letting go. And the belly soften. It's quite a stretch for the ribs. So we want to find some areas that we can reduce the tensing. Stretching and reaching has to have a little bit of that pull action. And tensing might be pushing action for some of us as well. So, study your push and pull with your muscles, even with your head's weight on the blanket, or you're tensing your right side of your neck, and you let your head relax into the blanket a little bit more. Okay, now with this side beam, let's motion so we feel the energy of the arms and how they can help float the lower body. So since right now it's not any of that kind of interaction, we'll take a turn. So what we'll move is our sand. I mean, you might have a bunch of props around you to push away. But when you turn into that left rib cage, basically roll into the bolster and use your ribs as if they, they're not limbs, right? They're not going to have like an elbow joint to help you push and prod up, but use them like you're trying to strengthen this area. Of course, you're not going to call your weight on your ribs, but feel that you touch into them with your bolster. So the bolster touches the ribs, and then I use my hands to come up, and then we take a downward dog pose. So we'll go right into turning, possibly to the back of your mat, most likely. Looks like a good place to go. Toes under, lift up the knees, and stride through the backs of your legs. Kind of pump through the feet and the calves. Feel that alternating direction with the muscles, and then the breath might be secondary right now, since you're probably putting some input into your organizing your bones to get here. Now take a wide stance, and then as you have a wider stance, you're going to lower down onto your knees. So it's a pretty wide knee balance. If this is not okay for your knees right now, you can use your blanket and put it underneath the knees, depending on your flooring. And round your back into cat. So feel when the chin moves to the chest and the spine lengthens. Really get some space in the mid-back. Inhale, move your brain forward. Feel the full arch through the spine. Chest, front. Exhale, hollow the belly and round your back. Okay, feeling that guidance of kind of loopy movement. You know, visualizing what a loopy movement might be. So it's likely not going to be all push and pull, but something in the mid body is able to loosen. So let's take that mid body and try to help it out. We'll lift up the knees to downward dog zone, and walk your feet towards your bolster and your hands back on your bolster, and then end up so that you can feel first the firmness of your feet. And then as your body is angled in an inversion, you can keep your hands on your bolster. You can swing them back behind you if they fall to the floor or they fall onto the heels. But spend some time doing some kind of spine searching movement, loosening up the spine. Holding onto the legs can be really helpful. So I have like this position of guiding my back side to side, right? If I have my hands on the backs of them and I can let my spine get a little bit more of a loopy movement, but you might like to let your arms just dangle, and you might like to hold your elbows. Yeah, so give it some moments here where you're simply sensing that lift of your sitting bones and the spine comfortably kind of swinging off of the back of the pelvis. It's a spine swing. Okay, that's the guide here. I used to call this elephant swing, right? You're holding onto your elbows. That visualization is the trunk, right, of the elephant searching around. But you might like it to be just a simple spine, the brain at the end of it. Coordinate the flow to support your brain stem and the circulation to your brain. So now, finally, you want to let go of any gripping, whether it's legs, bolster, elbows, and release. Sturdy on the feet. You might have to develop a little bend in your knees so you don't feel like you'll flop over. Okay, we're going to take a little strength here. So I want you to bend the knees. Take a block and place it between your knees so it's at the most narrow width. So I'm standing with my knees bending because that's the easy way to get my block. It's not really any other reason besides that. It's easier to put it there. Now, with my hands on the thighs, I want you to get a feel of reaching your seat back. So you kind of actively push your tush back, okay? And then hands on the tops of the thigh lids and round your back and come up to standing and lift up your heart. Inhale. And exhale, bend your knees, hands on the thighs, let your tush push back. And this time we develop the whole curve. So watch out for that block, right? It'll stop you. And you'll push into your hands and round your back to roll up to standing. Squeeze the block, lift up the heart, and then bend your knees, hinge at your hips, and then move back down, move the block away, and start to stretch your hands forward all the way to the blankets on the sides. Slide your feet back so you're in a length of your hamstring. So walk your dog pose into about hips distance. And as you're reaching your hips back, stretch your heels firmly down. Step your left foot into the center line and lift the right leg high to the sky. So let's not give a limitation on the direction of the joint, but get a feel of that lift of the right leg, whether it swings a tiny bit turning out to the right or not. Keep the left foot pressing down. Switch sides, right foot down besides the left, and then lift the left heel back and up. And feel the directional pulse of a leg lifting. Now, one thing we might have to be careful of is what if your wrist can't tolerate this? You might have to hold the sides of your mat, grip it, and then lift up that left leg. It might be helpful whether it's that or on your elbows. And as the left leg is starting to lower back down, we separate the feet just a hip's distance as we guide the knees down, hands open, round your back, curl the tail in, chin to chest. Really feel that chin gently tucking. Okay, and your navel is drawing in and up towards the spine. Okay, naturally come into a neutral back, as if you could put a platter on your back, so it's very neutral, right? It's not a deep arch. And as we lift the left leg back behind us, stretch the heel back. Keep it simple, just the leg lifting. Spine forward, trying to keep the crown of the head forward as best. And then put the left knee down and stretch the right leg back. My knees do not come down touching together, but they could in some variations. But today, a little bit more of that core control. Okay, the heel pushes. Now, if your foot turns out, try to keep the back foot toes facing down. Good. So try to keep working with that element of balance. And as the right knee tucks, feel the body tuck. And some of you like child's pose, I know. So this will be your opportunity today to get a little child's pose in. So reach your hips back towards your heels, and you might pivot your bolster up on your blankets like so, and then lower your head down and turn your head to one side. So the bolster is simply under your chest. If this is too much, you can also take a variation of child's pose, keep the bolster on top of the blankets and not squish back into your heels. Maybe your knees don't like that. So feel the hands up on top, but personal choice, right? So if you can kind of hug your bolster and turn your head to the other side, right or left side, whichever you're turning towards. Now feel the breath in the back. Feel that width through the lower track of your waist, back waist, belly soft. And then we'll crawl into a side sage on the second hip. So just feel that you can kind of move your legs back, work on crawling, and then we pivot the bolster and we come into the second side. So we maybe have a ball in the inner left leg. Maybe you have a sandbag for your external hip frame. I don't think we do internal. We're going to go external with the sand. And then come into that shape with the ease, like you know how to play this piece of the practice. So once you start to be able to crawl in and out of the shapes, the waist has a kind of this fibered band that when you get a full stretch, this type of position where you have the body kind of yearning for increasing its range, you might notice that the breath gets a little more challenged. So if you have kind of labored breathing, then it might be a sign that you might want to back off on the reach of the arm, maybe putting the arm open or the arm down. So take some time here to respect where your body can find some stillness. And then come into the shape for a good solid 1 to 2 minutes. And now if your sand is kind of helping you stretch, but it's dropping your hips to the left, it might not be the best thing for your joint. So, you know, working on the ribs is your secondary respiratory muscles, but you don't get to use these patterns much during your daily habits, unless you lie back on bolsters and breathe routinely during your day. You can focus on diaphragmatic breathing relatively easy, right, during your daily habits, but this is a little different, right, the costal breathing. So let the weight of your hips center, challenging nothing, right? Don't need to challenge yourself necessarily. Just find the shape, support the body, and breathe. You know, if that arm on the top is moving and you have it so it's radiating out, see if you can find it, come back to the center so the armpit is in a reaching pattern, but it's lengthening, right? Not opening. Okay, so the bones are stretching in a whole strip here. Now, just notice this, we have this openness in the pit, and we're going to be changing quite a bit with how those muscles are working with the benefit of our back body. So now when you start to guide your sand off of your ribs, you're going to turn to that right side so your left arm comes down and cuddle up. Bring your left knee towards the right knee and rotate into that hip and then come up to sitting. And take your bolster, so it stays in that centered position, but let's get on top of the bolster. Let's get on top of this. And take your blankies. So we're gonna do a little hip prep, hip inducing stuff. So you're going to likely want your blankets, like, so they're turned, or maybe they're in this quarter fold, you got them back into that position. But turn them so that they're across horizontal on your mat, behind your bolster. And you can be fussy like this if you feel like it. And take the, let's see, where are we going with the legs? Okay, so we got the right leg open, and we've got a sandbag on the inner leg, the left leg. So the right leg is out, the left leg is bent. The sand is on this inner left leg. And I probably want to broaden out my sitting bones more than any of the poses when I'm sitting in this shape. Okay, so we get a belt. If your left knee is a little bit uncomfortable, if it wants something under it, you could put a ball. You could use the typical block. You know, kind of feel what the differences are with your props, what feels like a good support. Not too much, right? You don't want to push the knee up, that's going away from opening the hip. So if your knee touches down, if the side flesh of the leg touches down, then keep that if you can for today's maneuvering. The sand might have to go higher, right? So you really are getting this area flushed out. So let's take our belt. And we got our unbuckled belt. Take the right leg is going to have the belt under the foot, and then we reach it forward. So my 2 layers of connection right now is a little challenge with the left hip, feeling happy with this experience, because now I've pushed the other limb in a funky place. So this might mean where you want to have something under that left leg. So kind of see if you can get your back muscles to combine the efforts and use your arms to kind of get into the experience of lifting that right leg. Should you lift it as high as possible? Well, maybe you can get your hands closer to your foot with your arm, not necessarily arm flexibility, but your hamstring flexibility gets your hand closer. Now, if you could hold your foot, you could do that version too for this one. So let's say you have mobility, you can hold your foot, you could go here, but you can tell that the belt works as well. If this isn't working, then you use the belt. The benefit of the arm is that you don't really have this this object, right, that you're trying to use your hands around, and it kind of muddies it up a little bit. But if it doesn't have the flexibility, it just isn't right to use to grapple with the foot with your hands. So find the musculature in your back opening, lengthening, furthering your experience of that line of your right back hip. Okay, just give it a few more moments though. Okay, so if you're holding onto your foot, try to keep the leg with that lift. So as if you're trying to get your heel to keep lifting up, not just the ball of the foot, but the heel. Okay, now bend and lower down. I think today we'll take the belt off in a different plan, but let's go with this interesting wave. So I put the foot down, it's in front of my left shin. And now I'm gonna reach my rib cage forward and put my sand on my right thigh. If you've got two sandbags, you can use one on each. And then you'll add your blocks and lengthen the arm gesture forward, but feel that right knee moving down. So it's not like my knee is trying to point and beg further itself this way. It's not this leg kind of position. It's trying to actually lower down to stretch open this right inner leg. Well, I don't know if it wants to, but I have a brain focus on getting it there. Okay, so get that feel of that openness of the thigh, or the challenge therein lies of the leg. And now when that right inner thigh is in motion, trying to get lower, move your blocks to the left. So we're going from basic to intermediate and not really jumping past that. We'll take our blocks to about probably a 10 o'clock would be good, depending on your spine. It's kind of behavior. If your spine that's grippy and you kind of predict that is touchy for your back, you go to about 11 o'clock. But the influence is in the hip, right? So if you don't notice anything in your hip, and it's a real tug of war for you, then you bring your blocks back in front. So it's okay. You know, we take the hands to the legs, two legs, two hands, put a sandbag to the left, and then move any object from under that left leg and feel that you get it really tucked in. So the left foot isn't necessarily turned open like a lotus foot, but it's close, right? I am trying to turn the sole of the foot open. You know, just like when you work with your hands, you're trying to get mobility in the joint. And feet are, you know, different stability than a wrist for certain, but when I'm here, I want you to try to take your right foot over the left knee, so it's on the other side of the left thigh, and the sand is on the left leg. And then we hold onto the right knee, but we deliberately lift up the ribs and reach the right hand back on the blanket. Feel when you're about, you know, 1/2 of your twist with your waist so that you're broadening at the chest points. And then the left elbow hooks to the right leg and you turn through the ribs. So you'll first feel the chest points with the hand on the knee. And then when the arm goes and strikes the leg, then you get the ribs to be involved. Okay, so keep it real simple. Can you relax the gripping on the left inner thigh? Now visualize someone standing on that leg. That's the adjustment, is standing on the leg. So try to move your hips a little, your body weight a little forward. And then feel if you can push that left arm into that right leg and twist. Breathing into those thick back ribs. This is a good back rib position. So listen to your breath. Now feel that right thigh. Try to move it towards you as you turn forward. So the stomach zone kind of pulls in. So there's a little bit of an inner layer of the abdomen that grips. And then we'll take that sand off and we'll turn into a pigeon pose. Okay, so I've got my right leg going back. Now this right leg is kind of gripped up right now. It's probably a little bound. So when I take it back, I want to hook the toes under just like you do in like when you push back to dog pose, right? So you might like to work with this hands open. You might like to come into the pose immediately with your elbows down, maybe on blocks or on the floor. And then feel how this left thigh kind of drops open into the hip joint. But it's that inner thigh that feeds into the circulation of the hip. So the right foot could stay toes under, and it could also bend and move the right heel towards your rear. I know that's the most pleasant thing. So just giving that experience of how a hip opener that is this progressive, right? This is a fairly influential shape for the hip joint when you're kind of motioning side to side within the shape. So steady the breath. You relax the exhalation. So you might feel when you fall through exhalation, it's a falling internally, right? It's letting go. It's an internal emptiness. So try to follow that to its end. And then let that inhale be also pleasant, but not like a surge internally. You try to find a way to have that in and out breath, have that reciprocal quality in your mind versus kind of startling. And then there's the sensation in the body from the position. So a few more moments. Those that want to shift your arms, some of you like to reach the arms to the right, I know. Some like to put the elbow down, and one elbow, the elbow of the opposite knee that's forward, and then take a little twist with the left hand on the sacrum. So that could be nice. The challenge here I find is that I get a little ambitious and try to kind of twist quickly, but you might find first the belly soft, and then maybe you turn your head, and then you turn your ribs to the left with small movements, patterning. But certainly it's like if the hip could sweat, it would be sweating in this position. Hip sweat. That's the name of the class. From Saturday Bliss. Okay. Okay, so get the feel that when you come out of this shape, you bring the hands forward and you press so that there's a centered lift. You know, I think would be good if we can, let's go with this. This is just a good traditional wave of movement for the bones. Okay, so let's push back. So we've got our left foot coming back and we alternate bending the knees. You know, maybe the hand gesture is a lot for your wrist, so you can hold the grasp the sides of the mat. You can also come down and bring your elbows wide, your hands together, interlace your fingers and lift up the knees. But I want you to get a feel of strengthening inversion. So this is all strength, right? It's not a floppy inversion. You've got to muscularize to be here. So feel the feet in a wide stance, breathing. Now we'll bring the feet together and we'll take pigeon on the second side. So you're going to move forward, taking that right knee forward. Yep. Settle in so that the hips, so we're going backwards on this side. Okay. Settle in so that the layer is different when you come from this backward muscular inversion to the knee pattern. It kind of hooks onto the bolster differently, the right foot. And then use the bolster height under your seat, even if it kind of seems to kick you a little forward. And then you might progress to use your back arch to develop. It's kind of a pigeon sphinx pose, isn't it? It's kind of a blend of shapes when you find the perspective of getting into the stillness. So the back foot could be toes under, it could be heel, starting to fold in towards the rear. You might even work with circling your left foot as your heel is up and you're drawing your knee to that bend. You can kind of play with that. And you certainly can find movements with your arms that could suggest some progression, right? Scooting your arms over to the left, and then you feel that angle, or left elbow on the floor in front of your right shin, and then turning to the right. So the hand is on the sacrum. Yeah, so instead of trying to push your seat back to the bolster, let everything kind of be a little bit in between, right? Unless you're insanely flexible and everything folds in shape, but you're probably not feeling like you're a piece of origami, right? There's places, there's sustaining muscles that are resisting. So just work towards rotation there, or you're in simple forward motion, which is good too. I don't want you to overdo any motions in the SI joint. So if you are twisting, come back, because we are going to do a little more of that when we sit on the bolster. So get a fairly sense of your hip here, where it's kind of sweating. Yeah, the abdomen can be trained after all this time of these movements where you're kind of holding in that space. So then the practice pulls everything apart anyway. So that consistent reminding yourself to soften through the core, let it kind of go with the stretches. And so there's not a nervous system stressor. Okay, now feel if you can actually kind of roll through the back of the pelvis to sitting. So play with getting yourself back to balance on your elbows. And then it's kind of nice. You can, since you're in your home practice, you can work into this at your own pace. And then I might look a little funny trying to figure it out, but that's okay. So we round the back so we feel like a cat shape. And this back thigh, you want the foot down. But when you bring your weight to your right cheek, you're going to stretch the left leg forward, right? So you're going to come back to sitting, right knees pointing out, get a sandbag. So be cautious how fast you swing around onto the joints. But this way we're kind of instructing them. We've got a sandbag on the right leg, it's bending, it's benting, and the foot is to the bolster. You have that pigeon leg still. And it didn't really change a whole lot. And then we got our belt under our left foot and we kick it up. Kick it up. Okay. So my right leg might not need a block or a ball on the second side. It might be very easy to get it down after all the work we just did. So noticing the difference is how you kind of tuck the parts together. And then as you pull, maybe you want to hold your foot instead of the belt. That's okay. If you're mobile enough to do that, I would encourage you to do that so that you're actually using your supply of muscles versus the accessory. But if you have the belt and it's working for you, be sure that you're holding as far up the belt as you can, right, towards the foot. So the arms are straight. And the left leg is straight in this position. It's lengthening, it's the muscles on the inside of that left leg are quite toned. Flexing the foot clearly has to happen when you hold it on the bottom. Breathing. And now noticing if you're holding with your hands, right? You're kind of scooping it up and you might feel that there is a fullness to the shape because your back it kind of has the blades and then the ribs have that full contour. So it's pretty neat to work with that connection. We just don't do it a lot during the day. So finally you can work with that rib cage. And then what's inside, right? What you're trying to lift up to the brain through. And then we lower down the foot and the belt comes away. And we just cross the left foot in front of the right knee. No big deal. Put the sand on the left leg. So we're working on the left hip. Okay. So when we're here, we're going to get that pretty cozy. Now, some might work with this left foot on the floor. Some might work with it on the knee. I know that there's some variations you could play with. That's okay if your knees are mobile in that way. But you might save that shape for when we're on our back today a little bit. So when I lean forward, I'm falling off my bolster. Okay. Take the blocks under your hands and try to get those outer legs to move to the floor. Okay, so you can feel the right leg pretty easily, but the left, yeah, the inner thigh might feel a little stagnant. So rather than kind of pumping and pushing the leg, see what happens when your upper body leans forwards. And it gradually gives that left leg permission to lower down. The blocks could be forward or to the right. If you're still kind of getting into the groove of getting that left leg to move down, forward could be where you stay with it. So just be respectful. There's nothing fancy to other directions in the shape. It's a seated hip opener. Can you feel that left leg working the design of the pelvis into the leg muscles? Now let's just take the word hip out of it and just feel from the pelvis to the bones of the leg. Okay, now when you come back with your hands just above your knees, so feel if you can actually get there with breathing and centering and seriousness. Okay, take the sand to the right side and really get it up in the leg, right? So it's really touching into the thigh. And then that left leg, I know it's been kind of cranked down. So when you lift it up, try to tuck the right leg under so it's not as far for this left foot to hook over. So I'm trying to get in a pretty compact shape, carefully getting my sand in there and then crossing my left leg over. So my right foot is open and my left foot is down, right? And that's the same, I believe, right? Left hand is down and a right hand is open and right foot is open too. So it's just all these biological similarities you're trying to gain. And then with that turn, yeah, imagining that core band, if it's kind of wrenching into your middle, you might hold the knee with the right hand and work on that proper lift. Yeah. There you go. That proper lift through the ribs. And then when you're rotating, yeah, if you can feel when you hold onto the knee, it's alignment difference. There's a difference in the back of the pelvis than when you hook the elbow, right? That is a little more intense on the breathing. So feel what's right for your shoulder, neck, arm muscles. Knowing that we're going to be on our back next might be welcoming for you to give a little effort with it. But it's not a class where we're trying to focus on all this about efforting, but feel the underlying kind of intent here. So notice my intent is to bring circulation into my left hip and my spine, right? So my spine is what we most think about here is it's a spinal twist, but it's a hip pose too. It's the spine of the hip. Okay. So start to loosen up that pressure with the right arm, and then feel how easily the body will come back to its center. It does like to be centered. The body wants to find that middle way. So please unlatch through that left leg. So we're going to uncross the left foot and then move your sand. You know what? Keep it in your lap. Keep it in your lap. If you need to kind of shake out your legs and forward motion, kind of shift them, we're going to swing them upside down so it'll feel like a good flush. But move your blankie so you have one at the back, straight back. Wait a minute here. This is where I was really making the change today. Okay. So the other day I did it where we had our blankets this way for Viparita Karani, which the blankets were both lengthwise, spine-wise. Okay. I'm going to do that again because I was getting some good feedback on that. But you could have it the other way, which is more challenging, with just the blanket horizontally across, one blanket, and all that space between. So this is a little more back friendly. Just know that it's a little easier on your back. So just maybe give it a try. We'll just do it for a few, like maybe 5-6 minutes of it. So it won't be like you're losing too much out of your regularity of stuff. So I've got my blocks at the side. And so see how this blanket, if you're going to try this, your pelvis is on the bolster. Okay, not your blanket. And then the blanket fills all the gaps. It's all the way complete. So, you know, my ribs, this blanket is spine-wise. So I can get a feel of the comfort in my rib cage. Now I put my sand on my belly and then bring my knees up. My feet are up now. Now, if you can swing the legs straight up and kind of feel that distribute the back of the pelvis, like you're kind of wagging your tail. So you're kind of getting some coordination of that balance. Now, when you bend your knees and you get your sand on your feet and you push the sand up, you want some space between your feet so that the knees don't jam together, which can tend to tighten that low back. So whatever you can do, even if you don't claim to have a tense back, and that's the one thing that's you got going for you, that doesn't hurt, let's not add any possibilities or challenge that. So I have some space at my feet, not a whole lot. And then I flex the feet and I come into the shape where my arms can branch open all the way out, straight open. So you've got spine-wise shape, but the arm gesture, the collarbone gesture is the same as the pelvis support with the bolster. So it's broad. So receive your breath. You can come into the shape and find stillness. If there's a little bit of shifty back and forward, that can be a nice hypnotic thing to do, right? To have little movements. You know, they might eventually find stillness, but you might have small kind of nodding movements during the whole pose for this one, little movements. So belly softens, strengthening through the diaphragm and resting the organs from gravity's downward pull, which we still have when we do seated poses, right? There's still that gravitational kind of sludge in the abdominal organs. So this higher lift is helpful of the pelvis. So the pretty much the remainder of the session, except for maybe a couple poses, we're going to be more in the inverted channel, a little bit more of that. Yeah. So maybe a little bit here and there where we'll lift and lower, but it's always going to be this awareness of the opposite of prolapse. We'll do fine, we can do it. So feeling when the legs are lifted. Now connect that lift of the legs with clearly the hamstrings. For some of you might not even feel that awareness pulling in that place. So what I want to have you be able to access is the accessory breathing muscles, right? So the ribs, if that's pretty flat and you don't really feel movement there, we're going to move our knees a bit. So you'll bend through the knees. This is assuming we all could use a little bit of awareness into the ribs. And you're going to move your sand, if you're using sand, on the back of your legs. So you can actually just kind of let slide and then land on the back. The closer to the back of the knees would be best, not right on the back of the knees like a full, but it is a child's pose on the back. This is more of a reverse child's pose. The great thing about this version is there's no knee jamming. Your knees aren't pushed into a hard floor. You know, you're not going to have that challenge with the joint as much, that complete pressure. So enjoy that the back and the organs can get the circulation without jamming on your knees or your ankles. And it's upside downish, so that's even more of a benefit for the organs, but they're getting squished. So I want you to continue. Obviously, you've got to try to breathe with this. It could be a little breath challenge to have your knees like that. But feel when you're in this kind of upward facing forward bend, right? You've got your legs now starting to go towards a little more bending, but lengthening so they're not folded all the way in, like so. So you have a little bend, a little length, but the key is this massage into the vital organs with the knees drawing in towards your core, not necessarily just your chest, but the whole midsection. So there's resistance because now you've got legs packing onto your torso and a sandbag. Oh, joy. Okay. All right, now keeping that circulation, we're going to take a elevated reclining twist, the good old ERT move. So we'll take a block set. I like to have the blocks on each side of my bolster. I don't spend dedicated time doing this organ work very often, so it's good to spend the moments on it. So I've got my legs kind of squishing in, my knees are now bending a little more. Now you're going to put your blocks, I would say start at the mid height, and if you can go lower then you do, but don't overdo it in your back. So you're going to slip the sand off of the legs, and let's start going the direction you can see me put the sand. So I'm going to bring my knees to the right, over to the block, and then put the sand on the exterior left thigh. But it's kind of like you've got this little sandwich event here going on with your bolster, and you're in between. And then you got the sand on the other side, right? A sandwich. Okay. So if the block is over on that right side, I'm surprised that I like the block at the mid height. I probably would think I would go lower, but that seems better for me now. Lower is more challenging, but feel where this wave of stretch is in the side layer of the leg into the hip. Send the left arm open. Feel where that right hand could offer help. Maybe you put it on your sandbag. and then you turn your head to the left. Or maybe you put the right arm just anywhere it falls. It's still connected, but it doesn't have to be purposeful. Okay, enjoy the sensations, right? Finding that you might feel dutiful to be in a practice. And of course, I appreciate your support, but feel if you can get something out of it that is really claiming that definition of circulation internally. You know, try to use the practice to your benefit, which will eventually benefit more than just you, right? You could be a little bit more calm or centered. We're good in the moment now. That's what matters for this moment. You know, if your knees are clashing, right, that's might be an issue for some, or the legs don't quite connect. It's a little touchy. So let's say when your knees go right, it's too much. You can put a ball between the knees and still do the pose and not have a sandbag, right? That's an option. But the sand is always on the outer leg. It's not going to be on the inner leg for this one. Okay, take a few more breaths here. Focus on the breaths as being the timer. So this is a good 12 to 15 to 20 breaths for this shape. 12 to 15 is about a minute, so. And now when I switch, I want to be aware that my back is not defined by me trying to be forceful and arch or tuck. It's about whatever's the organic way that it moves. So this is pretty important, I think, in a practice, especially when you follow schools and, you know, different lessons from different guru ideologies or what have you. You got to find what works for you naturally. But so you use those formulas as a guide. So when I move my sand away, I'm going to just take it off my body so I have a little bit more ease. And when you bring your knees back in, let's see, we've got, where did our belt go? Okay, get a belt, and you've got one side you work. We'll be very careful in this category. So I'm on my bolster. I'm still on that. Gonna get the belt, I'm gonna get my belt, I'm gonna put it under my left foot, and then as my right leg stretches down, that feels good, cross the left leg over to the right. And really get that feel of the, hopefully you won't be stuck at a wall, but you might be limited sometimes. Do the best with what you got here. Let the right leg be heavy and that left hip be kind of induced by the sensation, the crossover. Okay, now we've done this before with our leg on the bolster, right? We do those layers, same thing, except our leg is bent. But this one, I want you to try to keep the left leg straight. Now we'll go through the cycle of the leg. So we'll bring the left leg straight up like you did earlier when you were sitting, right? You had the leg in front of you, but it was straight. And now when you hold the belt with your left hand, slide the right foot in towards the bolster, push down into the bottom of the foot. And now when the left leg stretches out, you're going to take that Baddha Konasana leg, so the right knee moves open and the left leg stretches out equally, right? So the hip joint, the fragments of the hip are both moving outwards, but it does feel a little different from one leg to the next as far as what's defined. So the right leg is like your anchor, right? You could have it straight, that won't be wrong, right? But it might be hard to get your balance in your shoulder and other parts. So feel that left inner leg had to be kind of flushed out, and then bring it straight up. And then I want you to hold it with the left hand, the belt, the left foot, left hand on the belt. And then let that right leg reach down, but can you keep the right leg reaching, but have the heel off the floor? So you're using the bands of the leg, that resistance for the obliques. Well, there's some abdominal corners that are working. And reach your right arm overhead. Right, so right arm goes back, Right foot pushes forward, up off the floor. And the left leg, well, you know, if it's getting tired, you could move it a little forward, as long as the right foot doesn't come down. That usually goes with it though. All right, the leverage changes. Okay, bring the right knee up, hold the knee with your right hand comes to knee, and then left leg stretches out. You get the final pose. Well, not the final pose today, but of that series. Okay, so my right hand is holding onto my knee, and I am going to try to go on the inside of that right knee and encourage it to go outwards. Yeah, try to keep the left leg straight, but instead of that hyperextending variation, feel though that the muscles at the top of the thigh are contracting. Good, and then come back up and take the belt off, bring your knees center, and then over. The block on the left side is at the mid height to start. I know we're all different levels, so you get to choose what awareness you want with that hip. And then we'll take the sand to the outer right hip. Yeah, and again, if these blankets are just making it too easy peasy for you, you can always have one blanket under your head and no blanket under your back. Now things are getting easier as it goes. We're trying to find where we can get ease. So my legs are not at all really super stacked. They're so-so. If your hip is tighter on the second side, it's very likely your knees are going to be even less stacked. Right, so am I trying to get them stacked? Well, I'm trying to get my right leg closer to my left, my right knee a little closer to my left knee. But then I compensate in my back. So I've got to find my arm open, the left hand, I like it onto the sand, not required. And then turn your head to the right. Okay, so maintain that you get pretty comfortable with the groins, right? You want the groins to get, well, they're close as they could ever be now, right? If it's awkward already, this is even more. But you want to get a sense of the groins have been working quite a bit. Your adductors have been pulled and toned. So you might already feel different with that sensation and tone. And not to say that we're working on like just the tone, but it's that flush of the lymph, right? So stimulating the immune system. So the inner thigh, the groin, the lymph in the groin is a focus in a lot of these yoga practices for restorative. So let the body kind of simmer in this one a bit longer. Yeah, don't turn it up too high, just kind of keep it at a good temperature to kind of lubricate the joint. Don't put any flame on that, even if your hip is sweating. Now feel where the left hand connects to the pose. If it's on the floor, that's a connection. If it's up on the leg, it certainly encourages the direction of the joint. So use the left hand to assist that cross layer in the back. So kind of narrowing your focus of where you feel this in your right leg, connecting to your pelvis. And then when you move your sand, which could be anytime, if you like this and you don't want to leave it, you don't have to leave the pose. If you don't get a lot of this hip stuff during your week, you might want to really marinate it right now. Okay, but we're going to keep doing that. We're just changing the props. So then I take my belt, I'm going to bring my knees in carefully to the center and then put the belt under the right foot and stretch the left leg down, even though I'm coming off my bolster a bit there. And then stretch the right leg up and cross that right leg to the left, but keep the right arm really pretty casual. Just let it be open. There's no sand on the hip. You know, it's the directional angle, the therapeutic angle. Now move the right knee to bending, like you're pumping it a little bit, and then position the legs straight up, slide the left foot in, kind of speed moving into this side, okay? So now when the foot is flexed, the right foot, you know, when you have a cross hold, a crossover hold, there's almost like this necessary resistance, but it's kind of balancing, if you notice. Now when you take your right hand, it has its good and its bad, you know, for that shift over, but it's necessary for the adductor to stretch. So when we take that right leg outwards, we're going to let the left foot, it's on the floor next to the bolster, or kind of close. It's not really near my bolster, but it's bending, the foot is on the floor, and then the left knee opens. Okay, so the right leg goes out, and you're going to get a feel of that quality of movement through the hip. So get a feel, reaching out with that right leg, whether you're limited by a wall or not. Okay, now this time we're going to add this a little sooner. Okay, so you're going to bring that right leg so it comes back up for the moment. Stretch the left leg down so the heel is off of the floor. Stretch the left arm back so it's straight behind you. Now, feeling where there's exertion or maybe shakiness could occur through the top of the leg. The left leg, actually the leg that's below, could possibly challenge you. So however you're reaching, whatever feels realistic for you. It doesn't mean you have to pull your hand as close to your foot, but you know, some people might be holding their foot if their leg is straight, but that's if your leg is straight. There's always further to go. Good grief. Okay, now feel the back action. We're going to change it up. So you're going to bend the left knee, and you're going to actually get the hand to reach to the knee instead of the foot on the floor first. So you're going to get all the way to that knee with your left hand, and then let the right leg move open. Now, can you keep the direction of the leg out the same height as the left leg? That may not be the proper way to explain it, but if you were to close off the right leg to the left, when you move your leg open, I want you to keep it, that spatial awareness. So you're not trying to yank your right leg up towards your shoulder, right? You're flushing the lymph. And if we got to do a science experiment with this, we'll make sure we get the right angle on the leg. And you're right, the left foot, sorry, might be passive, it might be tightening up. So relax through your foot, breathe, focusing, lengthening, maybe shaking up. Okay, now when you take that right leg back up center, yeah, we're going to lower down. Take the belt off first. Keep that as a focus. As you move your feet forward like a bridge pose, what I want you to work with now is to bring your knees to your chest and push your bolster forwards. So this back thing is just bizarre here. I find this is very interesting. Okay, so we've got to get the blankets different, right? So this is something I want to have you notice. You got to switch around. So you're going to roll to the side, come up, move your blanket away. I know the blanket switch around is a bit much today, but we'll work with it. Thanks for trying it. So turn the blanket, I didn't lose everybody yet. Turn the blanket back to horizontal, and then come back so that you're on your back. Of course, we're inverting to the end, and then take your feet onto your bolster, push and lift up. Okay, get that bridge pose so the hip fibers are opening. Now take a moment here, just get a feel. Now I know the legs are kind of really busting a move to get there. They really got to work. You got the side leg tone. Your glutes are as toned as they're going to want to get for the certainly now. When you lift up, can you get a block under? And I know that some of you are fine with a block at the mid height, right? That's okay, it's across the back. But some of you might be able to get your block completely pointed up. So if that is possible, you might try it. So you got your bolster, so it's already helping you get higher. The bolster is an advantage under your feet. So if you were to lift and get your block higher, so it's across at the short end of the block, get a feel for that. If you are completely averted to that, don't do it. Don't worry about it. Don't even spend energy on that. But you got your block under your pelvis, whatever height you decided. And if the block is really high, clearly there's more of a bandha, there's more of a circulation to the thyroid. This is clear. You might kind of sense, how does that feel in your jaw and your neck, the bigger stretch there in your neck. So here we are with that block, whichever height I have it. And I'm going to reach my hands down so the palms are open, roll the shoulders down and in to the spine. And this becomes the portion of the practice where it is about the holds and the pose. So avoid rolling your head side to side so that the circulation in the neck is all safe, because it's got that arterial flow to the brain. So it's a careful place of circulation is right here in the neck into the brain stem. So generally in all these types of inversions with the neck, there's a clear direction not to turn the head much. So when I have my feet here on the bolster, what I'm going to encourage you to try to do, it's easier when the block is flat, I must admit, or it's at the lower height. You're going to try to straighten out your legs, okay? So if you feel like, wow, I'm kind of hanging off of this block, stuck under my pelvis, and it's opening up the front of my hip bones, that's true. It's opening up the quads and the psoas. So you can still do that, right, with any of the heights. Right? It doesn't have to be, if that's too much, put it a little lower and go there. It's definitely nice when you gain some of these poses, you start to make a little bit of gains in them for your circulation. So give a moment ahead where you feel your legs stretching down and the front of the hip bones, the heels are heavy, right? And the chest is rising and falling. So rest your eyes. Breathing slow. Empty completely. Now, if the legs are having some struggle to stay close-ish, hips distance, you might give the legs permission to be a tiny bit wider on the bolster so that you can kind of gradually get these fibers to open. It's probably not going to be good if you have your legs really close, or sorry, really close and they're spasming, your nervous system isn't witnessing letting go. So finding that space, even if your block needs to be low all the way down, so that these hip psoas can basically soften, okay? So give a few more moments here. Remember, palms are open. If your knees are rolling out, you really need to use that bolster to hold the back of the legs so you can keep the whole layer of the front of the thighs to reach. And now we're going to come into Baddha Konasana. If your block is high, you've got to move it down at least one notch. There's no have tos. I mean, it's been taught that other way with the block up as well. It's seen in all directions, but you're going to bring your knees out and your feet together. And we started with this kind of thing today. So we're kind of going full circle with it. Now, it is a pretty good opener, right, for the adductors, for the groins. But the soles of the feet are a little more together now than the first pose. It was like the outer corner of the foot touched. This is a little bit more of the heel. You can feel the difference in the foot flesh. Now, I suppose if my block was lower, that's a little more comfortable. Yeah, you're going to smooth out your back really soon. So This is going to be the adductor circulation, the groins. Okay, now this is a brief 45-second one. So when we come back up with the knees, feel the core blend of motion, bring your feet to the bolster, push down, really firm into the feet so they take the brunt of it. And then when you lift up your hips and you take that block, I know some of us, they're pretty high, so you might have to lift your hips up quite a bit. Take the block out. And then as your hips are up, bring your arms overhead. Try not to shock the sacrum so you still keep the hips up. You gotta really work with that leg balance, muscle balance. And then lower the spine. And the arms will go with the program, but focus on really feeling your back touch down. Slowly lower the back to the floor. It feels more like my back than my spine that I'm sensing. And then take about 3 more of those without too much drop down. So you're going to lift and lower to kind of fan the spine and the muscular kind of medley, because it's probably a little charged from the last pose, like it was vulnerable. So it's like you want to kind of slowly fan the flames there, lifting and lowering, even if it was pretty mild. So a couple times, but eventually you're going to get all the way down to the back of the pelvis. And then bring your arms open, like kind of angel arms. And the knees are side to side. So your windshield wiper in the legs. Really take the ease. We're going to get our way eventually to a final pose that's super calming for the back. So all that work we did in the midsection, the hip, the inner thighs, we can absorb. Good job. I know that some of the leg stretches and bridge angles are challenging. So when your feet are wide on the bolster, it's going to give you a little advantage with the circulation into the front of the hip bone. And my feet up makes it easier on my back. That's for certain. Okay, now we're going to bring the knees to the chest, so you're hugging them in. And taking yourself to sitting, you're going to roll to either side that you never get a roll to maybe. And then come up and pull your blanket in and take a seat on the blanket for a moment with your legs out, wide angle. Your bolster's wide, so if you're pretty mobile right now, you're feeling kind of like, oh, this is comfy, maybe you put your hands on that bolster just as it is. And try to keep the feet so the toes are pointing, or the feet are flexed so the foot bones are going up. Lean forward. Put maybe your elbows down. Maybe you can go that full focus. If that's just a lot, then you bend your knees, put your feet on the floor, and you lean forward here. This one feels great. I like the knees bending. If you feel like sharing which one's better for you, that's welcome. But the leg straight has its opportunity in a fuller back feeling sometimes. And those of you that are not going with those, take the bolster up and lean forward. Good choice too. Legs can get closer. Formulate the motion of the spine forward and centering up and exhaling forward. Even if you're in a still pose, you can still process that awareness, kind of visualizing the spine moving forward and up into its center channel. And now relax your footing, whether your feet are on the ground or the legs are straight-ish. And we're going to take our bones so that they center along the spine. This time our bolster is going to be under our feet. So we're going to take, well, I know it was under your feet a minute ago. We'll take our blocks on the inside of the mat, and then we'll move our bolster up, and then add your blanket to the bolster and let it be flat. Okay, so it's a flat blanket as your legs go on top, and you want your heels to float on the other side. So I don't think anyone has a leg length right now that your heels are going to be on the floor, but if they do, then put another blanket on top so you have your heels floating. So my blanket's under my, cross the mat straight across. And as I guide back down, now my back, I'm gonna scoot as close to my bolster as I can comfortably get. So it feels like my knees are kind of up, and that will ease my lower back, and then flush out the legs. So maybe the feet go a little apart so you feel like comfortable in your thigh muscles. And then as you're saying heart to belly, and fine tune that circulation all the way from heart to tummy with your sandbag. And so get the feel for where your back is melting into the ground, or it's been so warmed up from the practice, it is softening. And let the weight of your neck connect to the lengthening into the brainstem and all the way back to the weight of the brain, which is significant enough right now to balance out our body from the knees up to the brain down. Lift and lower the belly with the breath. Feel the collective and the connectivity, even if it's simply me that you sense, but others in the practice. And then sensing very specifically your breath in, filling the lungs. Exhaling out, letting the belly soften. If you can feel where your feet are very passive and not stirred up, they're just heavy. If there's any pulling around the foot, like you're tensing the muscles, you might gently kind of feel them quiver or feel the toes or circle, but certainly let it go. Letting go. Giving yourself permission to empty, but also mentally letting go. Now noticing the feet of operating motion, circling, so the feet might rotate outwards, inwards, backwards. Feel how they push forward and they have their natural operating tactic of pushing and thrusting to the ball of the foot. So right now you're feeling them kind of move in and out, not necessarily plugging into your feet yet. So let them be. Sensing where the sand is pressing, I want you to bring your hands to move that bag, and as it slides away, and then noticing if the belly feels just kind of some freedom or just plain and simple, comfortable. So taking the nourishment from the practice, moving your feet to the bolster on lightly, and then hold the back of the legs, they clutch in, and the knees have this kind of soaring ability to guide side to side. Let the knees guide. Feel your clutch on the back of the legs, and that helps you shift. It almost helps you get into a twist for the bones of the back. And then let's roll easeful to the side. Hands push you up. And then as you come to a sitting shape, you might sit into your sitting bones. You might fold your feet back and sit into hero pose, but feel where your knees are motioning the flesh of the pelvis to use the core muscles. So if my knees are spanning open like this versus if my knees are together, like when I sit in a chair, then I have the opportunity to open my hips. Okay, it's that first option for your stomach to be vulnerable and circulating versus kind of dumping. So feel the ribbon of the rib cage. Now visualize whatever color ribbons you want that to be. And then lift up your hands together and bowing into your heart space. Feeling that intricate layer of breathing in and that simplicity of letting go. Let's close practice with that focus or your intention from practice. Breathing in